The moment the CPS worker knocked on my door, clipboard in hand, face carefully blank, I knew exactly who had sent her. I didn't even have to guess. I didn't have to wonder, because there is only one person on this planet who would look at my children, my babies, and see dollar signs. There's only one person cruel enough to weaponize a government agency designed to protect kids just to get her hands on money that was never hers to begin with. My sister, my own flesh and blood. She stood at Thanksgiving dinner, smiled in my face, hugged my kids, told my daughter her braids were cute, and the very next Monday, she picked up the phone and told Child Protective Services that I was an unfit mother, that my children were living in filth, that I was neglecting them, that I had a drug problem. None of it was true, not a single word. But here's what she didn't know. While she was busy plotting, while she was rehearsing her lies, while she was filling out that anonymous complaint form, thinking she was so clever, I already had a private investigator's report sitting in a manila envelope in my attorney's office, exposed everything, every secret credit card, every payday loan, every bounce check, every lie she told to keep up the appearance of a woman who had it all together. She wanted my kids taken away so she could petition the court to become their guardian. And if she became their guardian, she'd get access to the inheritance trust our father left behind, the trust that was set up specifically for my children's future.
She thought she was going to outsmart me. She thought I was the weak one, the quiet one, the one who wouldn't fight back. She was dead wrong. My name is Megan Holloway, and this is the story of how my sister tried to steal my children and my father's legacy, and how the judge turned the tables so hard that she's now losing her own house. To understand how we got here, I need to take you back. Way back, because people don't just wake up one day and decide to destroy their sister's life. This kind of betrayal, it ferments, it builds, it sits in someone's chest like rot behind drywall. You can't see it, but it's been there for years, eating everything from the inside out. I grew up in Raleigh, North Carolina. My dad, Richard Holloway, was an electrical engineer. Smart man. Quiet man, the kind of father who showed love not with big speeches, but with actions. He was at every school play, every softball game, every parent-teacher conference. He drove a 10-year-old truck even though he could afford a new one because, as he always said, money is a tool, not a trophy. My mom, Diane, passed away when I was 11, and my sister, Courtney, was 14. Breast cancer. It was fast. 8 months from diagnosis to funeral. And that loss, it shaped both of us, but it shaped us in very different directions. I became quieter, more internal. I clung to my dad. I found comfort in books, in school, in routine. I grieved by pulling inward and holding on tighter to what I still had. Courtney went the other direction. She became louder, more demanding, more visible. It was like she decided that if the world was going to take things from her, she was going to grab everything she could with both hands before it disappeared. She wanted attention. She wanted things. She wanted to be seen. And honestly, for a long time, I understood that. I didn't judge her for it. Grief does strange things to people, especially to a 14-year-old girl who just lost her mother. But as we got older, the difference between us stopped being about grief and started being about character.
I went to NC State, studied accounting, graduated with honors, got a steady job at a mid-sized firm, met my husband, Derek, at a friend's barbecue. We got married when I was 26, had our daughter, Lily, a year later. Our son, Caleb, came 2 years after that. We bought a modest 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood in Wake Forest. Nothing flashy, nothing extravagant, but it was ours, and it was filled with love. Courtney's path looked very different on the surface, but she made sure it appeared impressive. She moved to Charlotte after high school, got into real estate, and, at least according to her Instagram, was living the high life.
Designer bags, vacations, a brand new condo in the South End district. She drove a white BMW and always had her nails done and her hair freshly highlighted. She also had a husband for about 3 minutes, married a guy named Todd when she was 28, divorced by 30, no kids. Now, here's the thing about Courtney. She had this way of making you feel like you were always a step behind her. Every family dinner, every holiday, every phone call, she'd find a way to remind you that she was doing more, living bigger, winning. And I let her. I really did, because I didn't care about that competition. I had my kids, I had Derek, I had my little life, and I loved it. But Courtney wasn't just performing success, she was financing it, and the whole house of cards was about to come crashing down. I just didn't know it yet.
In 2021, my dad was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. He was only 67. It hit me like a freight train. This man, this brilliant, steady, quiet man who could wire an entire building from memory, was forgetting where he put his keys, then forgetting what keys were for. I moved him into our guest room within 3 months of the diagnosis. Derek and I didn't even have a long conversation about it. He looked at me one night after the kids were in bed and said, "Bring your dad home, Meg. It's the right thing." And I loved him even more for that. Courtney's response? "I would help, but my condo isn't set up for that, and Charlotte is so far from his doctor's." That was it. That was her contribution. A sentence, an excuse, and then she went back to posting brunch photos on Instagram. For 2 years, I was my father's primary caretaker. I bathed him, I fed him, I held his hand when he didn't recognize me and called me Diane, my mother's name. I sat with him through the sundowning episodes, the confusion, the fear. I adjusted my work schedule. Derek picked up extra shifts to cover the gap in income. Lily and Caleb learned to be gentle with Grandpa, learned that love sometimes means being patient when someone asks you the same question 4 times in a row. Courtney visited maybe 6 times in 2 years, and every single visit she managed to bring up money. Dad's house in Raleigh, what's happening with that? Has Dad updated his will recently? You know, Meg, we should really talk about what's fair when the time comes. I didn't engage. I just took care of my father. Now, Dad, even in the early stages of his illness, had been smart enough to plan ahead. Before the Alzheimer's got bad, he sat down with his attorney, a man named Gerald Whitfield, and set up an irrevocable trust. Dad's estate, his house, his savings, his investments totaled just under $1.2 million. Not a fortune by any means, but substantial, meaningful. And here's the part that changed everything. Dad structured the trust so that the bulk of it, about $850,000, went into a trust specifically for Lily and Caleb, my children, his grandchildren. It was earmarked for their education, their future, their well-being. I was named as the trustee, meaning I managed it on their behalf, but I couldn't just spend it on myself. Every dollar had to be accounted for and used for the kids. The remaining portion, about $350,000, was split between Courtney and me, so roughly $175,000 each. When Dad passed in October of 2023, I was holding his hand. Courtney was not. She arrived at the hospital 45 minutes after he was gone, and the very first thing she asked when she walked into that room where my father's body was still warm was, "Did he change anything at the end?" I should have known right then. I should have seen the full picture, but I was grieving, I was exhausted, and I still wanted to believe that somewhere deep down, my sister had a heart. The reading of the will happened 2 weeks later in Gerald Whitfield's office. When Gerald explained the structure of the trust, that the majority went to Lily and Caleb with me as trustee, I watched Courtney's face change. It was like watching a mask slip. Just for a second, her eyes went hard, her jaw tightened. She didn't say a word in that office, but in the parking lot afterward, oh, she had plenty to say. This is garbage, Megan. You manipulated him. You moved him into your house so you could whisper in his ear and cut me out. I didn't cut you out, Courtney. You got your share. The kids' trust is for the kids. Yeah, and who controls that trust? You do. So basically, you got everything and I got scraps. $175,000 is not scraps. She slammed her car door so hard the BMW shook, and she peeled out of that parking lot like the asphalt had personally offended her. That was December 2023. For the next few months, things were tense but manageable. She didn't come to Christmas, didn't call on the kids' birthdays. I figured she was angry and needed time. I had no idea she was planning something far worse than silence.
It was a Tuesday in April of 2024. I remember because Lily had a science project due that week, a model of the solar system, and our dining table was covered in styrofoam balls and acrylic paint. Caleb was in the living room watching cartoons. Derek was at work. The doorbell rang at 10:47 in the morning. I know the exact time because I looked at the microwave clock when I wiped my hands on my jeans and walked to the door. There was a woman on my porch, mid-40s, professional. She had a lanyard with a county ID badge and a clipboard, and standing slightly behind her was a uniformed police officer. My stomach dropped to the floor. "Mrs. Holloway? I'm Sandra Chen with Wake County Department of Social Services, Child Protective Services Division. We've received a report regarding the welfare of the mind of children at this address. May we come in?" I want to stop here and tell you something. There is no feeling, none, like having someone from the government show up at your door and imply that you might be hurting your children. It doesn't matter how clean your house is. It doesn't matter how loved your kids are. In that moment, you feel accused. You feel violated. You feel like the ground has opened up beneath you. But I also want to tell you something else. I am an accountant. I deal in facts. I deal in documentation. And some deep survival-level part of my brain clicked on in that moment and said, stay calm, be cooperative, and document everything. So I let them in. Sandra Chen walked through my home with a checklist. She looked in the refrigerator, fully stocked. She looked in the kids' rooms, clean, beds made, clothes in the closets. She asked to see Lily and Caleb. Lily was confused but polite. Caleb, who was 5, showed her his toy dinosaur collection completely unprompted. She checked them for bruises, for signs of malnutrition, for anything that matched whatever she had been told. She found nothing, because there was nothing to find. But then she sat down at my kitchen table between Saturn and Jupiter in Lily's solar system, and she started asking me questions. And that's when I realized just how detailed the report had been. "Mrs. Holloway, we received information that you may have a substance abuse problem, specifically prescription pill abuse." "That is absolutely false. I don't take any prescription medications. I barely take Tylenol." "The report also alleges that the children are frequently left unsupervised for extended periods." "My children are never unsupervised. I work from home 3 days a week, and on the other 2 days, they're either at school or with my husband. Our schedules are coordinated down to the minute." There was also an allegation regarding the use of the Children's Trust Fund for personal expenditures, specifically that you are misusing funds meant for your children. And that right there was the moment I knew it was Courtney. Knew it with absolute certainty. Because who else on earth would know about the trust fund? Who else would weave that specific detail into a CPS complaint? I took a breath. I looked Sandra Chen directly in the eyes, and I said, "Ma'am, I know exactly who filed this report, and I need you to know everything in it is a lie. Every single word. But I will cooperate with your investigation fully because I have nothing to hide, and my children are safe, loved, and cared for. Sandra Chen was professional. She didn't confirm or deny who filed the report. They're supposed to be confidential. She told me the investigation would be open for 30 days, during which she'd make additional visits. She said she might need to speak with the kids' teachers, our pediatrician, and possibly Derek. When she left, I closed the door, locked it, walked into my bedroom, and cried for 45 minutes straight. Then I got up, washed my face, and called a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. I called Denise Alford. She was a family law attorney in Raleigh who had been recommended to me by a friend. When I explained the situation, she was quiet for a long moment and then said something I'll never forget. Megan, this is not just a CPS report. If your sister is trying to establish that you're an unfit parent, the next step is going to be a custody petition. And if she gets custody, even temporary custody, she may try to petition the court for control of the trust as the children's guardian. We need to get ahead of this, now. I felt cold all over. Not because I was scared, though I was, but because I suddenly saw the whole chessboard. Courtney hadn't just filed a CPS report out of spite. This was a strategy. This was a calculated, multi-step plan to take my children so she could take the money. Denise told me to document everything, save every text message, screenshot every social media post, and then she said something that I initially thought was excessive, but turned out to be the single best decision of this entire ordeal. I want you to hire a private investigator. If your sister is doing what I think she's doing, there's a reason she needs that money. People don't execute plans this elaborate unless they're desperate. Let's find out what she's desperate about. I called a PI named Marcus Webb that same afternoon. He was a former detective with the Raleigh PD, now running his own investigation firm. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting, and when he finished, he said, "Give me 2 weeks." He didn't even need 2
While
weeks.
Marcus went to work, I focused on surviving the CPS investigation. Sandra Chen came back twice more. The second visit, she spoke to Lily's teacher, who told her Lily was a happy, well-adjusted second grader with excellent attendance. The third visit, she spoke to our pediatrician, who confirmed both kids were healthy, up to date on all vaccinations, and showed no signs of abuse or neglect. Every visit, I was cooperative. Every visit, I had documentation ready, bank statements, school records, medical records, our daily schedule. I treated it like an audit because that's what it was, and I'm very, very good at audits. During the same period, Courtney went surprisingly quiet. No texts, no calls, no social media jabs. I found out later she was being coached by a lawyer of her own, a man named Victor Breslin out of Charlotte, who was preparing a petition for emergency temporary guardianship of my children. Let me say that again so it sinks in. My sister hired a lawyer to try to take my children away from me. Not because they were in danger, not because I was a bad mother, but because those children came with a trust fund worth $850,000. She was going to use CPS, an agency meant to protect children from actual abuse, as a tool to steal from her own niece and nephew. I found this out because Denise Alford had contacts in the family court system and got wind that a petition was being drafted. She called me on a Thursday evening, and I remember standing in my kitchen gripping the counter so hard my knuckles went white. "She's actually doing it," I whispered. "She's doing it," Denise confirmed. "But, Megan, we're going to be ready." And we were. Because by that point, Marcus Webb had delivered his report, and what was in that report, it changed everything. Marcus sat in my living room, Derek beside me, both of us barely breathing, and opened a folder that was almost 2 inches thick. "Your sister is in catastrophic debt," he said, "and she's been hiding it for years." Here's what Marcus found. Courtney owed over $340,000 in combined debt. That's not a typo, $340,000. She had 12 credit cards, most of them maxed out. She had taken out 3 personal loans from different lenders, using slightly different variations of her information on each application to avoid cross-referencing. She had a car payment on the BMW that she was 4 months behind on. And her condo in Charlotte, she'd taken out a home equity line of credit and drained it. She was 3 months behind on her mortgage. But it got worse. Marcus discovered that Courtney had forged a document, a fabricated letter from our father, claiming that Dad had verbally promised her a larger share of the estate. She had actually submitted this forged document to a probate attorney in Charlotte to explore contesting the will. The attorney had apparently declined to take the case, but the forged document existed. Marcus obtained a copy. He also found that Courtney had been making calls to Gerald Whitfield's office, our father's estate attorney, pretending to be me. She called 3 times, asking about the structure of the trust, the disbursement schedule, and whether the trustee could be changed. Gerald's office had gotten suspicious by the 3rd call because Courtney didn't know my security verification answers and had hung up abruptly.
The piece that made my blood run cold. Marcus discovered that Courtney had done a Google search history recovered from a public library computer she'd used in Charlotte that included the phrases, "how to get emergency custody of niece and nephew," "how to become trustee of a minor's trust," "CPS report anonymous," and "can CPS remove children from home on first visit?" She had researched this. She had sat down at a library computer specifically to avoid leaving a trail on her own devices, and she had Googled how to steal my children. I sat in my living room holding that report, and I felt something shift inside me. The sadness, the disbelief, the part of me that still wanted to see my big sister as someone who was just lost, just hurting, that part went quiet. And something harder, something fiercer, something that I can only describe as a mother's total refusal to be a victim, that part took over. I looked at Denise Alford's number on my phone. I called her. "I have everything," I said. "Tell me what we do next." "Now," Denise said, "we go to court." Courtney filed her petition for emergency temporary guardianship in June of 2024. When I was formally served, I read the document sitting on my front porch while my kids played in the sprinkler in the yard. The petition was full of lies, but they were polished lies. Victor Breslin knew what he was doing. The filing alleged that I was emotionally unstable following my father's death, that I had been observed behaving erratically in public, that the open CPS investigation was evidence of a pattern of concern, that the children would be better served in the care of their aunt, a stable, financially independent professional with no history of complaints. Financially independent. I almost laughed out loud. This woman was $340,000 in debt and about to lose her condo, and her lawyer was calling her financially independent. But here's the dangerous thing about family court. Perception matters. And on paper, if you didn't know the truth, Courtney's petition looked almost reasonable. CPS investigation? Check. Concerned family members stepping up? Check. She even included a character reference from a colleague in Charlotte and a letter from her own therapist saying she was emotionally prepared to take on a parenting role. She'd been building this case for months, maybe longer, every piece carefully assembled to paint a picture of a loving aunt rescuing children from a struggling mother. But she'd built her house on sand, and I had a bulldozer.
Denise Alford filed our response within 10 days, and it wasn't just a defense, it was a counteroffensive. We didn't just deny Courtney's allegations, we presented Marcus Webb's full investigative report. We included certified copies of Courtney's credit card statements, loan documents, and mortgage delinquency notices. We included the forged letter she'd created claiming Dad had promised her more money. We included the library computer search history. We included the phone records showing she'd impersonated me to our father's estate attorney.
And we included an affidavit from Sandra Chen, the CPS investigator, stating that after a thorough 30-day investigation, the case against me had been closed as unfounded. No evidence of abuse, no evidence of neglect, no evidence of substance abuse, no evidence of financial misuse. Case closed, unfounded. We didn't just defend my motherhood, we exposed Courtney's entire scheme in black and white. Denise also filed a motion requesting that the court investigate whether the CPS report had been filed in bad faith, noting that filing a false report with Child Protective Services is a crime in North Carolina, a Class 1 misdemeanor that carries up to 120 days in jail. When Courtney's attorney received our response, I'm told there was a very uncomfortable phone call between Victor Breslin and his client, because nothing in our filing was opinion or allegation. It was all documentation, all evidence, all verifiable fact. Courtney could have withdrawn her petition at that point. She could have walked away, licked her wounds, and disappeared back to Charlotte. That would have been the smart move. But Courtney has never been smart when she's desperate, and she was very, very desperate. She doubled down. She insisted on going to the hearing. Fine by me. The hearing was scheduled for August 14, 2024, in Wake County Family Court, Judge Patricia Moreno presiding. I will never forget walking into that courtroom. Derek was beside me. Denise Alford was in front of me, carrying 2 banker's boxes of documentation. I wore a navy blue dress and the pearl earrings my dad gave me for my college graduation. I was terrified, but I was ready. Courtney was already seated at the other table with Victor Breslin. She was wearing a white blouse and gray slacks, understated, humble, nothing like her usual flashy wardrobe. She looked at me when I walked in, and do you know what she did? She smiled, this soft, sad, sympathetic smile, like she was there out of love, like this was hard for her too. I looked right through her and sat down. Judge Moreno was a serious woman, mid-50s, reading glasses. She'd clearly reviewed the filings because she wasted no time. This is a petition for emergency temporary guardianship filed by Courtney Holloway Breslin regarding the minor children Lily Holloway, age 7, and Caleb Holloway, age 5. I've reviewed the petition and the respondent's reply. Miss Breslin's counsel, you may begin. Victor Breslin stood up and gave his presentation. He talked about Courtney's deep concern for the children. He referenced the CPS investigation, carefully omitting that it had been closed as unfounded. He painted me as overwhelmed, as struggling under the weight of grief and responsibility. He asked the court to consider the best interests of the children. When he finished, Denise Alford stood up, and she was surgical. Your Honor, I'd like to begin by establishing that the CPS investigation referenced by petitioner's counsel was closed as unfounded on May 22, 2024. The caseworker's affidavit is in Exhibit D of our filing. No evidence of abuse, neglect, or substance use was found. The respondent cooperated fully with the investigation. She paused to let that land. Then she continued. Your Honor, we believe this petition is not a good faith effort to protect these children. It is a financially motivated scheme to gain access to an irrevocable trust valued at approximately $850,000, established by the children's late grandfather, Richard Holloway, for their benefit. I watched Courtney's face. The sad smile vanished. Denise walked the judge through Marcus Webb's report piece by piece. The debt, The credit cards, the delinquent mortgage, the forged letter, the impersonation calls to the estate attorney, the library computer searches. With each exhibit, Courtney sank a little lower in her chair. Victor Breslin's pen stopped moving. At one point, Judge Moreno took off her reading glasses, looked directly at Courtney, and said, "Miss Holloway, did your attorney review the respondent's filing before today?" Victor Breslin answered for her. "Your Honor, my client maintains that—" "I asked your client, Counselor." Courtney's voice was small. "Yes, Your Honor." "And you still wish to proceed?" Yes." Judge Moreno put her glasses back on and continued reviewing the exhibits. Then came the moment that broke the hearing wide open. Denise called Marcus Webb to testify. He took the stand, calm and methodical, a former cop who knew how to present evidence. He walked through his findings, and then Denise asked him one final question. "Mr. Webb, in your professional opinion, based on your investigation, what was the likely motivation behind the CPS report filed against Megan Holloway?" Victor Breslin objected. Judge Moreno overruled him. Marcus Webb looked at the judge. "In my professional opinion, the CPS report was filed as a strategic first step in a plan to remove the children from their mother's custody, petition for guardianship, and ultimately gain control of the children's trust fund. The search history recovered from the library computer in Charlotte shows these steps were researched in sequence over a period of several weeks. It was premeditated." The courtroom was silent. Not dramatic silence like in the movies, real silence, the kind where you can hear the air conditioning humming. Judge Moreno took a full 60 seconds, I counted, before she spoke. "I've heard enough. I'm going to make my ruling from the bench." She took off her glasses again. She looked at Courtney, and this is what she said, as close to verbatim as I can remember. "Miss Holloway, the evidence presented today paints a deeply troubling picture. You filed a report with Child Protective Services containing allegations that were investigated and found to be entirely without merit. You then used the existence of that investigation, an investigation you initiated with false claims, as the basis for this petition. This is not concern for children. This is manipulation of the legal system." Courtney was crying now, not the sad, sympathetic tears she'd been prepared to perform, real tears, panic tears. "This petition for emergency temporary guardianship is denied. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for investigation into whether the CPS report was filed in bad faith, which constitutes a criminal offense under North Carolina law. I am also referring the evidence of document forgery and identity impersonation to the appropriate authorities." She paused. Then she added one more thing. "And Miss Holloway, if I ever see a filing from you regarding these children again, absent extraordinary and verified circumstances, I will consider it harassment. Are we clear?" Courtney whispered, "Yes, Your Honor." Denise squeezed my hand under the table. I didn't cry. Not then. I held it together because my kids needed me to be strong, even though they weren't in the room. Especially because they weren't in the room. We walked out of that courtroom and I didn't look at Courtney. I didn't need to. It was over. Except it wasn't. Not for her. The consequences came for Courtney like dominoes. The district attorney's office did investigate. She was charged with filing a false CPS report, a Class 1 misdemeanor in North Carolina. She pleaded no contest and received 12 months of probation and a fine. Not jail time, but a criminal record, a permanent mark. The forgery was investigated separately because the forged letter impersonated our deceased father's wishes regarding a legal estate. It fell into a gray area, but it was enough to trigger a fraud investigation by the state attorney general's office. That investigation, as of the last I heard, was still ongoing. The identity impersonation, calling our father's attorney while pretending to be me, resulted in a cease and desist order and a formal complaint with the North Carolina State Bar regarding Victor Breslin's potential knowledge of and participation in the scheme. I don't know the outcome of that complaint, but I know Breslin quietly closed his practice about 6 months later. And then there was the financial collapse. See, when you're $340,000 in debt and your scheme to access a trust fund falls apart, reality catches up fast. Courtney's condo in Charlotte, the one she'd taken the equity line against, went into foreclosure. The BMW was repossessed. 2 of her credit card companies filed lawsuits. Her wages, what was left of her real estate commissions, which had been declining for over a year, were garnished. She lost the condo. She's living in a rental apartment now, from what I've heard through distant relatives. She drives a used Honda. The designer bags are gone. The highlights are gone. The Instagram has been deleted. Part of me, and I'll be honest about this, felt satisfaction. Not joy, not celebration, satisfaction. The satisfaction of knowing that the truth won, that my children were safe, that the system, flawed as it often is, worked this time. But there's another part of me, a quieter part, that grieves. Because I didn't just win a court case, I lost a sister. The sister who braided my hair when I was 6, the sister who taught me to ride a bike, the sister who held my hand at our mother's funeral. That sister has been gone for a long time. Maybe she's been gone since she was 14 years old and the world took something from her that she never recovered from. I don't know. I'm not a therapist. I'm just a mother who protected her kids. Courtney has not contacted me since the hearing. No call, no letter, no text. Total silence. And I've let that silence stand. Maybe one day, years from now, if she gets help, if she finds some version of peace, maybe we'll talk. But I won't be the one to reach out. Not after what she tried to do to my children.
Lily is 9 now. Caleb is 7. They don't know the details of what happened. They know Aunt Courtney hasn't been around, and when they've asked, I've told them simply that sometimes adults have disagreements and need time apart. That's enough for now. When they're older, if they want to know, I'll tell them the truth. The trust is secure, untouched, growing, waiting for them when they need it, for college, for their first homes, for whatever future they choose to build, exactly the way my dad intended. Derek and I are solid, stronger even, the kind of strong you become when someone tries to tear your family apart and you hold the line together. And me? I'm okay. I'm more than okay. I learned something through all of this, something my dad tried to teach me my whole life, but that I didn't fully understand until I was sitting in that courtroom. Quiet strength isn't weakness. Patience isn't passivity. And the truth, carefully documented, clearly presented, and fiercely defended, will always, always outlast a lie. My name is Megan Holloway, and nobody, not even my own blood, takes my children.